In this video, I want to show you a technique for how you can take a photograph like this one and then isolate any object that's inside of it so that you can place it inside of your InDesign layout. And even if you've got it isolated, you can even do other little effects like this where it has a gradation of color in the background and even so much more. So I'm going to jump in and let's get started. Right now I've got my layout in InDesign, but I need to really start off by opening my image in Photoshop. Once it's opened in Photoshop, the first thing I'm going to do is to go to my Layers panel and I'm going to make a copy of my background layer. The easiest way to do this is simply dragging your layer down to the new layer icon at the bottom, the little plus sign, and that'll give you your copy. This way, if I make any mistakes, I've always got a backup of my original background. And I can turn off visibility for this, and I'll even rename this my new car. With this selected, the first thing we need to do is to make a selection of our overall car area. Now this selection doesn't have to be perfect. Later on I'll show you how you can clean it up. But the quickest and easiest way to make a selection is to use your quick selection tool. If you don't see it, it's hiding underneath your magic wand or object tool, but this is the tool that we want. And do pay attention to the size of your brush. You can make it larger or smaller, and make sure you're working in add-on mode. Now with our new car layer selected, all you have to do is click and drag over your car, and you can see how it's quickly and easily locating any edges that it can detect, and it's adding on to your selection. Now, as I do this, you can see that it is going to start picking up some areas that maybe I don't want to select. For now, that's okay. I'm going to keep this just as it is, but I'm going to go around and see if I can select as much of the car as I can, as quickly as I can. And everything looks pretty good so far. Now, once you've got your selection made, I'll even clean it up here. With that selection done, go over to your Layers panel. Do make sure you still have your new car layer selected. Then we'll go up to Layer, Layer Mask, and we want to choose Reveal Selection. Adding this layer mask is going to erase away anything that's behind it. And it's not really erasing it, it's masking it away. But check out our Layers panel. Notice that you've got a new little icon next to your layer area. Anything that's black inside of this masked out area you can see is now transparent, and anything that's white is kept on here. Now obviously I did a quick selection and I'm missing a lot of different areas. So what I want to do is I want to go through and I want to clean up the selection that I've got. In order to clean up a layer mask, we need to use our brush tool. Going over to our tool panel, do make sure you've got the regular brush tool selected, and pay attention to the kind of brush that you're using. In general, you can use just some of these default hard or soft edge brushes. I'm going to keep mine relatively hard, but if I need to, I can change up the size depending on the area that I need to cover, and if I need a softer edge, I can change up the hardness of it through here. Also, while we're up here, make sure you're working in normal mode and your opacity and flow are both set to 100%. The final thing I want to do is I want to reset my foreground and background color to their default black and white swatches, and you can do that by clicking here. Right now I've got white set as my foreground color, and with white done, this is where I can go in and I can repaint any areas that I may have missed. So when you paint white inside of your layer mask, this unmasks that area so that you can see the picture once again as a whole. So I'm going to go back along and very quickly re-find any edges that are missing or maybe inaccurate. In this case you can see I forgot the little side here, even the one on the other side. Now as I'm painting, I'm doing this very quickly and obviously I'm making a lot of mistakes. So for instance, you can see right up here where I've gotten a little bit too much of the background. In order to add back on your mask, you can go back over to your Swatches panel, and clicking the little arrows, this will swap it over to black. So notice those two swapped back from there. When you paint black inside of an area, this is where you can zoom in and you can remask off the area that you want. Now it is helpful to change up the size of your brush, and it's also helpful to zoom in until you get the details that you want, But very gingerly, very carefully, I'm going to go through and mask off and remask all of the parts of this car until I'm cleaned up. The last little tip that I'll remind you of is do make sure you're working with your mask selected. If you try to do any painting on top of your picture, it's just going to paint the picture and you're going to get a color. And obviously that's not what we want. With the mask selected, this will let you work in black and white so that you can go through and mask and unmask the parts that you want. So I'm going to take some time and fast forward through and clean up all of the edges. Now with this done, I've completed my basic transparency removal of the background. I should be able to see just the checkered all the way around the outside edge. Now to save this transparency, we need to save this as a Photoshop file. So I'm going to go up to File and down to Save As. And I'm going to call this Yellow Car New. Do make sure your format is saved as a Photoshop and you've got your layers turned on. We'll say Save to this and also OK to maximize compatibility. Now I can jump back into my InDesign file and, I'll get rid of my two little examples and show you what this would look like. So if I wanted to place this car into a transparent area, what I want to do is to go up to File, down to Place, and not choose the JPEG, but let's get the new Photoshop file that we have. Right now we'll say OK to any import options, and when I click and drag, this will place the car, and notice now that it's got the background nice and cleared out. We'll place it here and then scale it up to fit the size that I need it to be. So doing this is a great and simple way of isolating the images. But let's say you wanted to do some more effect to the background of it. So let's say you wanted to have a gradation of a color or even just dimming the background of the original image. If we go back into Photoshop, here's the technique for doing that. I'm going to create one more layer on top of this and we're going to fill it in with just a solid color. To do this, we'll go up to Layer, down to New Fill Layer and choose Solid Color. Now you could use a gradient or a texture if you wanted, but I'll just keep it for this. It'll ask for a name, and I'm just going to keep it the default. And here's where I can pick whatever color that I want it to be. So you could choose any color from here, but I'm going to keep it just as a solid white, and we'll say OK to this. And I want this fill layer to be below my new car layer. So I'm going to click and drag and bring it down to there. Now I've got my image isolated on a solid white layer. I could keep it like this, but let's take it a step farther. Instead of it just being a solid white color, I'm going to turn back on my transparency of my background, and I'm going to lower the opacity of this layer. Up here at the top of my Layers panel, when I click on the opacity and drag it down, you can now see that the white is covering up the background and it makes it very, very nice subtle effect. So it's a great way of de-emphasizing that so that you can see the car on top of your design. And this may work better for your design, for your layout. The other thing you can do is to give it that gradation effect that I was showing you earlier. Notice on InDesign that this isn't just gradiating from white to black or white to any other color. It's actually turning transparent as it gradiates up to there. And so here's how I would do that in Photoshop. First of all, back in my Layers panel, I can turn off my background layer. Let's pull up my opacity back up to 100%. When I added this new fill layer, it gave me a layer mask. With this layer mask selected, here's where we can add on our gradation. To do that, I'm going to go over to my Tools panel and locate your gradient tool. It's usually hiding underneath or with your paint bucket tool. With the gradient tool, go up to the top and make sure you have your, I got the wrong thing selected. Click on the down arrow and under the basics, make sure you have the second option selected. This is the foreground to transparent selection. You should be able to see the little checkered setting up from here. I've selected a simple linear gradient and my mode and opacity are set to normal 100%. I've got my foreground color set to black, and with that, I can click on the inside of my gradient mask and drag down, and you can see how this is going to add a gradation of black from the top down to here. And it's going to subtly and slowly change the transparency from white to transparent. Now with this done, if I was to go up to File and Save, this will save over my original Photoshop file. I can jump back into InDesign, and we'll click on the little warning at the top, and that will update my file, and that will add on the gradation from here. Again, I can send it to the back and place it where it needs to be within the overall layout of this design. So this is a great technique to use, and I'd love to see it used in your designs for this class.